Hello, BookTube. Hello, friends. Welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and I'd like to do another episode of my Newbery reading project, which you could call Newberries Through the Decades or 100 Years of Newbery, because by the time I get done with this project, there will be 100 Newbery Medal winners. And I just thought this would be a fun thing to do because I've had a goal to read all of the Newbery winners for several years now. In fact, the majority of what I read probably 10 to 15 years ago, maybe more like 10 to 12. And in fact, some of those I've had to reread because it's been a while and I've kind of forgotten some of the details. But I thought it would be a fun time, since we're almost at the 100 years of Newbery winners next year, to just go through them by the decade and tell you about them. So I can't tell you about them until I've read them, and so I started with the Newberries of the 1990s, and then I did the Newberries of the 1980s, and so in this video I may as well keep going backwards and show you the Newbery winners of the 1970s. So in the 1970s, that was when I first learned about the Newbery Award. I was in elementary school. I started first grade in 1970 and then graduated from high school in 1982. So I was basically in school for all of the 70s. And these were my formative years. And when I was in the fifth grade, starting fifth grade in 1974, I decided that I was old enough to go to the library on my own, and I asked my mom if she wouldn't just drop me off there while she did her shopping. We tended to do most of our shopping in the larger county seat town in my home county of Bryan County, Oklahoma. So in Durant, Oklahoma, they have the Robert L. Williams Library. Since that time, it has moved to a newer facility, but the wonderful librarians there were very patient and amazing to not mind, at least they didn't show it, that my mom had dropped off a kid by herself in the library, because I truly was very interested in reading and learning about the books and learning about the library. And I think in that time frame, that first year that I got to spend so much time at the library, that is what really awakened my love of books. I think that's probably the year I discovered Nancy Drew, and along that same time, probably in my first trip to the library, the librarian showed me a poster with the Newbery winners, and so it was 1974, so that's, we had, it pictured all of the winners from 1974 all the way back to 1922. So I remembered picking up a couple of those books and reading some Newbery winners and really getting interested in trying to read some of the books that were pictured on that poster. I remember that Where the Wild Things Are was the Caldecott winner of one of those early years in the 70s, and I remember looking at that picture and thinking, oh, that looks neat, I'd like to read that. And I probably did, but I don't think I'd read it right away because I think it was checked out. So anyway, the book that I remember first reading that was a Newbery winner is Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, which is the Newbery winner from 1974 or 1973. Yes, I believe. I don't know. It's back here. Anyway, let's just go ahead and do like I've been doing in the other videos and go in order. I have all of the Newbery winners of the 70s here on my shelf, and so we're just going to go through them one at a time and talk about them. So the majority of these I read, like I said, 10 to 12 years ago, and I have reread a couple of them since then, and I have maybe changed my views a little bit about some of them, but anyway, we'll just go through them one at a time. So the first book from 1970 is Sounder. This is probably my least favorite of all of the books from this decade. And I remember when I first listened to this on audio, I hated it. And I have gone back and listened to it again just like last month. And I have to say, I think my reading taste has matured a little bit, but I still didn't like it. And I mentioned in my July wrap-up that it's such a hard book, and I mean, it's not long or anything like that, but the treatment of animals and animals in pain just gets to me. It gets to me, and I don't like it. I don't like that feeling of having to read about animals in any kind of pain or mistreatment. And that's basically what I remember about this book, because that trumped everything else about the book. So I don't even know what else the book is about. It's about this boy and a dog, and honestly, you'll have to read it for yourself, but I can tell you, if you have a super soft spot for animals like I do, it's going to be a tough one to get through. And it is by William H. Armstrong. It is on audio on Hoopla, and so if you want to check it out, it'll take you all of an hour, I think, to listen to it. And then the next one is 180 degrees different, complete turnaround. I loved this one, and I just read this for the first time in the month of July. I had to read it in print. I think that's why I never got around to reading it or listening to it, because I could never find it on audio, and I don't even know if it is on audio, but finally I read it, and I have to say, I think God knows the right timing for everything, because I don't think it would have meant as much to me if I had read it even 10 to 12 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, but not much earlier than that, because it's about a girl and her brother. The girl is the main character, but her brother has a brain injury, which really manifests itself a lot like autism. So I saw a lot of my daughter in him, and what I perceive that is going through her brain when she's trying to reason out life. And that spoke to me. Then the girl this is supposed to take place, it's contemporary for like 1970. So this girl is 14, which is just about the age that my sister was in that time frame, maybe a little older. She's 10 years older than me. So, Charlotte, you can tell me how old you are. Yeah, in 74, you would have been 10. So this girl was, so 1970. Yeah, so I get my... Anyway, y'all do math. I don't want to do math. So, long story short, what I'm trying to say is I could picture my sister in this role, and, because that was the era where she would have been similar in age to this girl. And then I myself, in 1970, was 5. And so, yeah, my sister would have been 15, and this girl's 14. So, yeah, I was right. So I was 5 or 4, and then turned 5. So, even though I'm a little younger than this girl in that year, I still remember the times, and I can picture the 70s, and I remember what it was like, and it just felt right. So, and it should be right because it was written then. So, yeah, it's completely authentic. And then the other thing is that I related to the aunt. They're being raised by their aunt because their parents, I believe, have passed away. And the aunt goes through times where she appears a little bit selfish because she just needs some time to herself. She has to raise this special needs child. And so a lot of times she relies on the older sister to take care of him because she just wants to watch a TV show. And then when he comes up missing, which is what happens fairly early in the book, because that's what most of this book is about, him wandering off and getting lost, and they're all trying to find him. So the guilt she feels for just wanting to have a few minutes to herself, I get that. Oh my goodness, I totally get that. So this book just spoke to me on so many levels. If you didn't live in the 70s and you don't have a person you love with autism or a brain disorder, you might not get it as much as I do. So it might not speak to you as much as it did to me. But for me personally, I loved this book and I thought it was fantastic. So I'm really glad to own a copy of it. Speaking of owning copies of it, I own all of these books except two of them. And I would love to own a copy of this one, The Slave Dancer. But we'll get to that one in a minute. So, actually, do I own Sounder? Yes, I even own Sounder, even though I don't like it. And really, because I think I found it at a library sale not that long ago, and I knew that I was going to be doing this video, so I just picked it up. So, give me 1 second. So the 1972 winner is Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. My apologies. At the beginning of this video, I said that it was from either 73 or 74. It's 1972. It's by Robert C. O'Brien. This is a fantasy story about a little mouse, and she is widowed and has her baby mice, her children, and she lives at the edge of a garden, and normally she moves from one home to another in order to avoid the spring plowing, because her winter home, or her, I'm trying to think how it is now, her winter home would get plowed over in the spring, and so she has to move to a different home. She goes back and forth each, twice a year. So one of her children is very, very sick, and she can't move him and doesn't know what to do. So I believe it's one of the crows that flies by, or maybe it's an owl or something, I don't know, which seems kind of contradictory. But anyway, they tell her to go to the rats. Go to the rats for help. And she's like, the rats? Oh my, that was kind of a scary prospect for a little mouse. So she does. She goes to the rats, and the rats are amazing. I don't want to tell you about the rats, but oh my goodness, when I was a child and I read this, I think this was probably the first fantasy book that I had ever read, and I loved it so much. I have read it again in adulthood. I still really enjoyed it, and I just thought it was great. Someone else has written some sequels. I only have the third book. I don't have the second book, so I haven't read the third one yet. I don't know what takes place in those next two books, and they're by a different author. But this first book I thoroughly enjoyed, and this is the first Newbery winner that I ever read. The next one, the winner from 1974, is Julie of the Wolves by Jean Craighead George. This is the start of a trilogy. I have read all three books, and I thought they were fantastic. The story is about a young Eskimo girl who is being given over by her father to marry a man who is not a good person, and she's frightened and she doesn't want to do it, so she decides to run away and survive on her own. And during the story, she basically survives with the wolves and becomes not really part of the pack, but just, they begin to trust her, and it's just a beautiful story. I thoroughly love this. And just as an interesting little thing, I believe I've read Hatchet before I ever read Julie of the Wolves. So I don't know if you remember me talking about in the very first video that I did, I told you I was originally inspired to read Newbery Winners from a coworker who had read all of them when she was younger. So after I read Hatchet, I came to work and I said, "Oh, have you ever read Hatchet?" She goes, "Yeah, but it's just like a Julie of the Wolves, but without the wolves." And at the time, I had never read Julie of the Wolves, but she's right. They're both survival stories, and I thought this was really, really good. So then the next one is a hard one to read, but I really did enjoy it. This is The Slave Dancer by Paula Fox. Now, she's got an honor book. Well, actually, yeah, it's like, is it The One-Eyed Cat? Which I haven't read. I showed it in my 80s video. But anyway, I have read this, and wow, I had no idea that this kind of thing went on. But it's about a young boy who is not black. He is just, I think, maybe poor, or maybe not. I don't even know. It's a boy, though. He gets kidnapped to go on a slave ship because the slavers hear him playing his flute or fife or something. He played some kind of instrument and played it well. They hear him playing and they kidnap him to go on the slave ship with them to play music where they make the slaves dance, basically. You know, they have this every day or every few days. They make the slaves who are all shackled together, they make them get up and walk around and basically dance for a certain length of time to keep them from getting, you know, completely, like, to keep their muscles from getting atrophied and things like that. So, wow, is this a tough story to read, but just so eye-opening and so compelling. I really would recommend it. I thought that it was a great book. It is, like I said, it's by Paula Fox, and it is a Newbery winner from 1975. I lose count after a little while, but yeah, 1975. So now from 1976, this one, hang on, let me get turned around here. The 1976 book, I didn't connect with this one really. In fact, I remember not really enjoying it because I didn't really get it. I went back and just looked at a synopsis today just to kind of refresh myself on it. And I checked out this book cover, or this book from the library, because I wanted to show you this visual. Now, I did have a copy here, but this, to me, doesn't really give you near the visual that this one does. So MC Higgins the Great is this young man right here. He spends a lot of time sitting up at the top of a 40-foot pole. He lives on a mountain in the Appalachians, and his family has owned this land for years, like going all the way back to slavery, and now it's in danger because there's been strip mining nearby, and it's just in danger of like sliding down and ruining his family's land. So that's part of what's going on. There's a few other things going on, some other people that enter the story, and I don't really know exactly. But I remembered thinking, I don't really get it. And even the synopsis that I read said, this story takes place over a period of 3 days, but nothing really happens. And so it's really not just me. I mean, there definitely are some merits to the book and some hard things and some compelling things. But for me, I just didn't click with it like I did some of the other books from this decade. So this is MC Higgins the Great by Virginia Hamilton. And by the way, MC stands for Mayo Cornelius Higgins. Okay, so the next one, I've read the next one twice. I listened to it on audio several years ago when I was just listening to everything, all the Newberries that I could get my hands on. I listened to this and I got done with it and thought, what just happened? I don't get it either. And then sometime years later, I found out why. It's the fourth book in a series. I don't know why they picked Newbery Winners to be farther down in the series. Now, you could read the story and get something out of it without reading the rest of the series. But now that I've gone back and read the entire series, it's so much more understandable now. I get it. In fact, the first book in the series, this is book 4 in the Dark is Rising sequence. Book 1, called The Dark is Rising, was a Newbery Honor book in, I think, 1974. Yes, I believe 4. So I read it. I've listened to it on audio a few times, and then because it's kind of hard to understand too. But then when I got book 2, I read that in print, and I feel like this is a series better read in print because book 3, I think I read that. No, I think I listened to it on audio. And then book 4, I read it in print because I couldn't find the audio again. I understood it much better reading in print. And then book 5, I listened to an audio, and I didn't get really it either. It kind of went past me. So I think this series is better, for me anyway, better read in print. So anyway, it's a fantasy series. It takes place in England. It's basically about four kids. Three of them are related. I think they're brother and sister, or maybe there's four of them. And then there's another boy who is an old one. He's the seventh son of a seventh son. He's the last of the old ones. And these kids all have to band together to help fight the dark forces. And that's basically what it's about. It's a good versus evil story. And it takes place, I don't know if it's contemporary for this era of the 70s or if it's supposed to be a little bit historical, like maybe takes place in the 50s. I'm not even sure. But anyway, it's okay. It wasn't my favorite fantasy series by any means, but I enjoyed it. And you could read just this one, but I think to really get what's going on, it's better to go back and read the series. So then the next one is Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And this one I did enjoy. This is a hard book. As I recall, it's been years since I listened to this on audio, but there is an African-American family, and they're just in the middle of this very racist area, and I believe it involves the KKK, and they're setting fires everywhere, and it's a survival story, basically, of this family trying to survive in the middle of this heavy racism. And I thought it was very compelling. I don't remember a lot of the details, but I do remember really enjoying the book and finding it a very important book, and thought it was well deserving of the award. So then the next one is a story that I think is probably best described as heartbreaking. This is Bridge to Terabithia by Katherine, Paterson. And did I tell you the author of this one? I think I didn't. I think I didn't tell you the author of the last few. Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is by Mildred D. Taylor. And then The Grey King and the Dark is Rising sequence is by Susan Cooper. So then this one, Bridge to Terabithia, is by Katherine Paterson. I've read a couple of other books by her. I think she has another Newbery Honor book that I've read. I can't remember what it is now, but anyway, this one I listened to on audio several years ago, and it's about a girl and a boy and their unlikely friendship. They create this whole fantasy world in this place, like in a forest area that's near where they live, and eventually there's a tragedy and it goes from there. But it is a very compelling story. There is a movie. In fact, you probably can't tell from here, but this is a movie tie-in cover, and the boy is played by my daughter could tell you his name, the actor who grew up later to play PETA on The Hunger Games. And she said the girl is also an actress who's done a lot of things now. I don't recognize her from this picture, so I'm not even sure who it is. But anyway, this is a movie tie-in cover, basically, is what I'm saying. Okay, one more. So this was 1978. So for 1979, we have The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. I did not remember much about this, and so when I was searching to see if there was an audio copy at the library, I was going to just listen to it again real quick. I discovered there's a movie, so I watched the movie, and I think the movie probably follows the book pretty closely based on the description on the back. But I remembered that it was about a man who was doing his will by video, or someone was reading his will, and all these people had been called in, and there was going to be some kind of a contest or game to see who would get his fortune. And so the movie I thought was very good. The what's his name? The Mr. Westing is played by Ray Walston, who, wasn't he in My Favorite Martian? Or I don't know, he's been in a lot of things, and so he played all the parts that Mr. Westing plays. So anyway, this was fun. I shouldn't have said that because I don't want to give away stuff, but you can tell from the movie what, kind of what's going on. This was fun. This kind of reminds me a little bit, at least the premise and how it starts, reminds me a little bit of the 39 Clues. And I would say I enjoyed the 39 Clues more than this book, at least the first book, The Maze of Bones, because they both start out with a patriarch or matriarch who has died, and their will is being read, and they've assembled this unlikely cast of heirs, and only one of the heirs is going to actually be the heir, and there's a contest to figure out who it's going to be. So that's basically what this is. And the contest is to figure out the contest is to figure out who took my life. So that's the story here of the Westing game. I thought this was pretty good. I didn't love it, but it was okay. And I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. So that's everything. Those are the Newbery Winners from the 1970s. The only Newbery Honor book that I have on my shelves, I have read 2 Newbery Honor books. One of them is book 1, which is The Darkest Rising, which is book 1 of this series that the Grey King is a part of. And then the other one that I've read is Frog and Toad Together by Arnold. Is it Lobel or Lobel? I think it's Lobel. And I thought Emily might have a copy of that. I was just looking on her shelves, and she doesn't have a copy. But I think it's on audio on Hoopla if you ever want to pick it up. It's a cute story about a frog and a toad. And then the only one I have on my shelves is by Laurence Yep. It's called Dragonwings. This is a really beat up copy, and I don't know anything about it. The only reason I have it on my shelf is because when I was at a library sale one time, I saw this little medal right here, and I thought, oh, well, that's a Newbery book of some sort. I may as well pick it up and give it a second look. I think this is maybe a part of a series, and there is one farther down in the series that is a Newbery Honor book from the 80s or 90s. And I think this one may be the first in its series, but I don't know anything about it. So, Dragonwings by Laurence Yep. And that's about all I have to tell you about the Newbery Winners of the 1970s. If I have accidentally said the wrong decade, I almost said 80s again, but these are the 1970s, which, as I mentioned earlier, it was my first decade of exposure to Newbery Winners at all. So I have almost completed reading the Newbery Winners of the 1960s. I have 2 to go, and it's going to take me a little while, though, before I can do that video, because much like the Darkest Rising sequence, one of the books that I have not read is the 4th or 5th in a series, and I have not started that series. So I have the first one checked out from the library, which I'm going to probably go ahead and try to squeeze in even in the midst of reading romances this month for the Summer Fling Readathon, but it will be still another month or 2 before I can get all of those books read and present that video of the 60s for you. So I hope you have enjoyed this series so far. If you haven't seen my videos of Newbery Winners of the 80s and of the 90s, I will link those down below. I will invite you to come and watch those videos and comment if you have read or enjoyed or hated any of these books. Do you agree that these books should have won the medal, or do you think that other books of that year would have been more deserving? Let me know. Let's chat about it in the comments. And by the way, several of you who have commented in the previous videos that you are also working to read all of the Newbery Winners. I hope that you do. It is really fun. And, let's just chat about them in the comments below. So that's all for this video. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.